Yeah.
And transcription.
Great, thank you very much. So thank you very much. So the focus of this panel is the role of cloud platform providers to support responsible and safe AI. I'll just give a very brief overview, and then we'll open it up to the panelists. So if I just move on to the next slide. So increasingly, artificial intelligence and services from AI are becoming more and more important, and many of these services require very complex computational infrastructure to deploy. So the role of cloud hosting platforms becomes quite significant in these contexts. So for example, when cloud services are hosting these AI applications, preserving user privacy and ensuring compliance with consumer protection legislation has become very
Omer,
significant. Yeah.
excuse me interrupting you. We are getting out, getting in again because we don't see you, neither Lorenzo, okay, from this laptop. 1 minute.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, very well. Now we see you very well.
Thank you, Nasima. So yeah, so the question really is that how can we provide what is the responsibility of cloud hosting platforms to ensure that the services they support are compliant with these consumer legislation? So there's been a lot of recent interest in Safe AI, for example, a summit held here in the UK, and IBM and Meta have launched this idea of the AI Alliance, which is again focusing on the area of responsible AI. And the EU, of course, has been way ahead of everybody else. The Digital Services and Market Act includes rules for online platforms and what they refer to as gatekeeper companies or cloud providers. These are large digital platform providers that host online services, also search engines, app stores, and messenger services. So you can see some more details there at the bottom. So the EU Digital Services and Market Act talks about two things. The first thing is what these gatekeeper, these very large platform providers should offer when they provide these cloud services. So for example, they should allow the interoperation with the gatekeeper's own services for third-party applications. They should allow their business users to access the data that they generate. So this goes back to things like GDPR compliance, where people should be aware of the data that they generate and what they keep on the gatekeeper's platform. So you should have access directly to your data. The other is that issues around advertising, so provide companies advertising on their platform with tools and information necessary for advertisers and publishers to carry out their own independent verification of the advertisements hosted by the gatekeeper. So this is very, very significant because most of the revenue generation that happens in services is through advertising. Advertising plays a key part in generating revenue for cloud service providers and other services that are hosted on these platforms. So this becomes quite significant. And finally, business users should promote their offer and conclude contract with the customers outside the gatekeeper's platform. So the key idea here is that the gatekeeper should not have the monopoly in terms of controlling the market. And I think that's very important, that it should be an open market, which is supported by the gatekeeper, but using a relevant business financial model. And finally, the other element of the EU Digital Services Act is what these gatekeepers should not do, right? In addition to what they should support, the second thing is that they should treat services and products offered by the gatekeeper itself more favorably. So you should not allow that to happen, right? So that means that if other people are hosting services, those services should have similar type of exposure. They should not prevent customers from linking up businesses outside their gatekeepers' platforms, and users should be allowed to uninstall any pre-installed software or apps if they do not want to use them. Of course, the other is concept again of tracking users outside of the gatekeeper's core platform services for the purposes of targeted advertising. So these are things that the EU Digital Services and Market Act talks about, which gatekeepers should not do. Right. So if they are found to do this, like GDPR compliance, there is a financial penalty, right, that could be imposed on these gatekeeper companies. So really the focus of this panel is saying that, given the maturity of cloud provision and edge provision we have, how could cloud and edge service providers respond to this requirement? Right? How can we be much more visible? So how do our resource management and scheduling and orchestration strategies respond to this challenge, right? And the other question is, what are we missing, right? What is, given the current state of the art, what are the gaps, right, that we need to fulfill in order to be able to address these emerging challenges? So we have 4 panelists: Antonio Celesti from University of Messina, Baman Javedi from Western Sydney University, Louise Bittencourt from University of Campinas, and also Thomas Sidlow from University of Newcastle. And so it's great to see that they're coming from different parts of the world. So just to get a perspective on what these aspects mean for them. So with that, I'll pass over to Antonio for the first presentation. Antonio, I'll change the slides. Just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Omar, for your introduction. So, to be honest, there are lots of concerns, ethical issues, in my opinion, about artificial intelligence. And one of the most important concerns is about generative AI. Why this? Because generative AI is a kind of artificial intelligence allowing to create new contents, text, audio, video, and so on. As you know, the most important example is ChatGPT, but we have also an increasing number of other cloud providers delivering this kind of services. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so about generative AI, we have to consider, as I told you before, many concepts. We have concepts about risks in the surrounding data. We have risks about privacy, security, policy, and also about the workforce. Moreover, we have many potential issues also about new emerging businesses. For example, caused by misinformation, plagiarism, copyright infringements, and harmful content. Can you go ahead, please? Okay, so I tried to summarize the main concerns and risks about the use of generative AI. So first of all, we have to consider the distribution of harmful content, because generated content can be used potentially as a weapon, for example, during the election, but also to manipulate the population, but also the worldwide opinion about a sensitive topic. Moreover, we have also issues about the copyright legal exposure, because models are trained on massive, unknown, and unreliable, very often unreliable data. And this requires a carefully validation about the generated content by cloud providers. Moreover, we have issues about data privacy violation, because models are trained on data that sometimes include unknown information coming from the internet, so that we don't know if the tool we are using to generate the new content is using data that is violating the privacy of someone. Moreover, we have the issue, the concern about sensitive information disclosure, because having a huge amount of data, we don't have the control on any piece of information, and we don't know if among this huge amount of information we have some sensitive data that can be disclosed in the final generated content. Moreover, we have also an amplification of already existing bias. In fact, generative AI can potentially amplify this concern, because we can use models generated outside of our control in a remote cloud provider placed somewhere, for example. And this is one of the main issues also about the use of general cloud services. We have also concerns about the workforce roles and moral, because generative AI is changing the way to conceive the way to work, and in fact the companies have to define new roles and new ethics for their workers. And we have also issues about, as I said before, data provenance, because having a huge amount of data, we don't have the control of this data. And finally, we have a concern about the lack of explainability and interpretability. Why this? Because often we don't know all the logic or the algorithms behind any generative AI model, but we only use it, but we don't know if this intelligence is manipulated or not. Please, Omer, can you go ahead? Okay. Just to conclude my brief talk, in my vision, obviously, cloud, edge, big data, and AI are strongly related technologies. About complex AI, obviously, we cannot train a model on a single server computer, but we need a big data, high performance computing platform. And obviously, we have to use the cloud. And for this reason, cloud providers play an important role in generative artificial intelligence. From one point of view, we could consider edge computing as a partial solution, because we can isolate the training of data inside edge devices. But even though we can use, for example, federated learning and other collaborative intelligence, we cannot solve all issues I mentioned before. And finally, we have to consider that obviously internet has not barriers. And nowadays we are talking about new paradigms such as cloud edge continuum, because data is continuously exchanged from the edge to the cloud and from the cloud to the edge. So that, in my point of view, we need some regulatory compliance all over the world, focusing on controlling the exchange of data between the cloud and the edge. That's all about my view.
Thanks, Antonio. So I'll pass over to the second speaker, which is Professor Baman Chawadi. Go ahead, Baman.
Thanks, Antonio, and good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm gonna give you a few points here. So if Omar go to the next slide, I just want to ask if any of you remember about the Tay chat AI. Anyone remembers that? So it was emerged 2016, right? So it was very short. It was just a chatbot, and from the Twitter, introduced by Microsoft in March, I think 24th of March 2016. So many years before the ChatGPT, and Microsoft had to bring it down in 24 hours because it started learning about hate speech, racism, and those kind of things. The reason I put this one was a couple of reasons. First is you should know that the online environment is quite hostile, and if you leave the AI to learn from the conversation that's happening there, it can be very, very bad, and that's one of the reasons. And second thing was just in 24 hours, it learned so many of those racist and offensive comments. So very, very short period of time. And the lastly is these tools came from one of the biggest companies in the world, in technical company, Microsoft. So of course, beforehand, we had those issues, but not with that speed and that company. So this, of course, doesn't tell us that we should stop developing the chatbot or the AI tools, but it tells us that you can leave it unsupervised and you can leave it to the conversation and learn from what is happening. So I think these few points was very, very essential. Fast forward to 2019, if you go, please, next slide. Fast forward to 2019, Australia was one of the first country that adopted artificial intelligence ethics principle. And for you to know, Australia loves rules and regulations. So they're very crazy about the rules and regulation, and they love to enforce that. So they were 2019, one of the first countries that they introduced that. And that was the kind of voluntary ethics. So as you can see, there are 8 principles, and many of them, of course, are common sense in terms of security, privacy, and transparency of the data, and protecting the value. But a couple of them, I think, is very interesting. One is about accountability. So it means that whoever developed these systems is accountable for what it has been done, right? So you can't just leave it as it is. You are accountable for development and the outcome of that. And one of them that I think related to the today's topic is the contestability, right? So you can contest the result of what is provided to you, because if part of the community or people with different race, different religion are getting offended by those outcome, they could be able to contest that and reflect that. That's to be, in a timely process replied. And interestingly, that they start this from 2019, and they did some 4 pilots. And one of the early pilots was the Microsoft chatbot. So because the Microsoft knew the issue that they had beforehand, and they adopted this platform. And I think there are a lot of documents online that is very good reading. Next slide, please, Omar. From my view, I put this slide just from the view that I want to demystify the provider's role in the protection and, of course, accountability of the AI for responsible AI. If we look at the Edge Cloud platform, so obviously we know that cloud platform are well established. They have a third-party provider. Edge platform, of course, we don't know. I mean, there are some provided by telecommunication companies, some provided by cloud providers. So still, it's not a solid provider there, but we can consider that as part of the system. So there are 4 components that we need to look into that, as you can see in this slide. So there are data, AI models, system, and tools and application. And if you click over on that, you show that these are my perspective. Can you click over on the slide? There should be some. Oh, okay, there you go. So the only one that certainly we can say there is a role of providers strong there is the system. Of course, if we consider the edge provided by the third party. But the rest of them are a shared model between the user and, of course, the provider. Data, obviously, you bring that, you generate that. AI model, We can have a pre-trained model provided by providers, but definitely there are training that's happening by the user. Tools and application, the same thing. So you can provide the tools in the provider, but definitely users bring that. So from my view, while these 4 items are essential items for provider and user, but I think we need a kind of a shared responsibility model to protect and making sure that all the AIs and the technology that we provide has those factors in terms of responsibility, accountability, and protection of what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baman. So I think that shared responsibility model is something we can pick up later. So going to the next. So Luis, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this panel. Thank you, Robert, for the introduction and the colleagues for the views. So we can go just to the next slide, please, Omer.
Sure. Let me just do that. Okay.
Yeah, so now what we have in terms of implementation, something like this, right? Everyone sends data to the cloud and the intelligence in the cloud, and then you have to process everything in the cloud. So that's why you're discussing the responsibilities of the cloud provider, right? Next slide, please. But of course, you have many different frameworks that try to come up with different, like, let's say, solutions for ethics and cloud-based AI. And we have some pillars for this kind of discussion. And the pillars include fairness, transparency, and privacy. Maybe I'm going to focus a little bit more on private, but I think those go through data ownership, right? So the owner of the data should be able to control the data. And also, of course, they should understand how data is used. So I think one of the points that maybe the cloud provider should provide some way of us to understand how our data is used, how it is accessed, who accessed it, how it was accessed, and for what reasons it was accessed. So having this kind of, let's say, tools or APIs or anything that the cloud providers could make us use would help us understand how our data is used and for what. And it is a thing that I think it's not available today. And also, the third source AI should pass through different also aspects. It should be lawful, ethical, and robust. I think the ethical point, we should have like common grounds for the providers. As Omer mentioned, that this alliance is coming up. I think this is a good thing, because if you don't have common grounds for ethics, then one provider could have advantages over the other in the business, and then they could take over the business because they are not ethical as the other one was, and then they can have some unethical advantage, right? And the figure on the top right-hand side is just to show there are many different aspects. In this case, there are 12 different aspects that could be used to create policies for ethical AI. So this is from UNESCO. Next slide, please. And because we are talking about cloud providers, this slide here shows that a different perspective, where instead of having every intelligence on the cloud only, then we have intelligence distributed from the cloud to the edge. So the idea of 6G and the edge cloud continuum is that you can have the distributed intelligence. Next slide, please. So the distributed intelligence is one way of coping with privacy. Then you can keep part of your data with you, but at the same time, you can also share and learn what you learn from that data, right? So you can share the models, but the data is still with you at some extent. And then the distributed learning can actually benefit all, but not using the data as, let's say, centralized storage, right? For example, federated learning, we had a workshop here, the ICC, which had lots of papers on federated learning. So this is one of the way of moving forward. So the sensitive data can be kept with the user, of course, and the models will be distributed. So we have parts of the knowledge with you and parts of the knowledge with other people, and then these parts of knowledge are aggregated together, so we can have some privacy instead of sharing the data and sharing forms. Of course, I think this kind of alliance that Omer mentioned should also involve telecom providers instead of only cloud providers, because it is kind of distributed intelligence. Then you have the edge computing, and then likely edge computing will have telecom providers as main, let's say, players. So this, of course, can be a solution, that can also be only a distributed and harder problem to solve, because you have more people involved in defining ethics and defining what is good or not for the users. So we need, as I mentioned before, tools, so we can know where data is, how data is accessed, why the data is accessed, so we know how our data is used, and also we should have tracking of this data and tools for us to bring the data out of the cloud, bring the data back to us. So easy data movement for the users, so they can maybe move the data among providers or even bring the data back to him. And this data should be, after you move them, it should be accessible, and it should be used in the same way that it was used before, so you have control over it. I think that's it. That's what I had. Thank you, Herbert.
Thank you, Luis. So I'll pass to Thomas. So go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you for giving me the possibility to be a part of this panel. Can you go to the next slide? My colleagues discussed a lot what should be taken into account for trusted and safe AI. But I would like to come back to the digital market. But I would like to take back to the Digital Markets Act, and that EU is way ahead of the others in terms of some sort of regulation and so on. The thing is that when I was preparing for this panel, I have figured out that some actions have already been taken by EU in terms of the regulation of gatekeepers and the cloud providers. What we have on the slide is the list of identified gatekeepers by EU just recently. So we see 6 of them. It's supposed to be also for Samsung, but Samsung gave a good excuse that Samsung browser is not included as one of the gatekeepers. Nevertheless, out of these 6 companies, Alphabet, of course, is Google, and ByteDance is a TikTok. So one of the observations is that as EU and Europe, there is 450 million of people which data are processed by US and China's companies. So the first question is, don't we really have in Europe gatekeepers and companies working as a gatekeepers? So it's a first observation out of this first iteration of gatekeepers identification. And the second is the core service platform, core services provided by these gatekeepers. I'm not sure if is it the full and complete list of core services that we might be afraid of talking about responsible and safe AI. What about some utility providers? What about telecom operators? What about our data, how we behave calling to someone else? What about the data, how we are using our electricity, how are we using our water supplies, and so on and so forth? We might think of plenty of different AI tools and services that might use this data, but discussion about this data and how to open this data in the responsible way has not been started, as far as I know, in the regulation bodies. So can you go to the next slide?
Sure, just go ahead.
So the second question is, because some actions in EU has been started already. So instead of identifying these gatekeepers, the information to these gatekeepers has already been sent that they need to be compliant with the regulations. But the problem is that it's a sad observation that our voice as a research community might not be taken into account, because information has been sent to the gatekeepers without even informing them or giving them some guidelines how they should approach in providing the compliance to the EU regulations. So simply, we shouldn't ask how they should go towards responsible and safe AI, but we can only sit and wait and ask why they did it in the way they actually plan to do. Because for sure, all of the processes inside these companies, in these gatekeepers companies, has been already started. So we can only sit and observe and analyze what they did and what they do in the future. So it's quite a sad observation, because no one asked us as researchers before what should be included in the regulations before sending this information to the gatekeepers, as far as I know. So at least it wasn't a public interviewing of or discussion in the research community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for, let me just stop sharing. Okay. Okay, so I guess we are back. So I just wanted to start off with one question, and then we can open it up for discussion also with the audience. So I guess that starting with the last set of slides. So I guess that's a very important question, right? That many of the cloud providers. Sorry, you cannot hear me?
Yes,
we can
Okay,
hear you.
great, perfect. So many of the cloud providers that are actually operating in Europe are not European companies. So according to a recent survey, for example, the French and German kind of governments have created this thing called Secnum Cloud, which is to say that if you have public services like your taxes, that are hosted on platforms, those platform providers should actually have presence in the relevant European countries. So the question is, if 69% of the providers in Europe are non-European providers, what does that mean for the AI services that these providers host? Who owns the outcome of the AI services and not just the data? So do you have any thoughts on that from the panel? What happens if the hosting companies are not based, because it's very hard to know what the AI algorithm is doing anyway, right? So anybody want to pick up that question?
I mean, who owns the output of the services, right?
Yeah,
I
so
don't
it's, yeah.
know. I think it's a hard question because if you think about innovation, cloud providers usually bring innovation, and then innovation is part of their business. And then if you get the output of their business, then you're maybe taking some of their innovation out of them, and then maybe they are not competitive anymore. But I think it's a hard balance between what they can do and the innovation, right? And what you can regulate, right? It's always a balance between regulation and innovation that you have. If you regulate the outputs too much, maybe the innovation will be hampered, and then you will not have interesting things happening, right? But on the other hand, if you just leave everything free, to be like an anarchy, and then maybe you don't have good things coming out as well. So I don't have an answer, but I think it's this balance between innovation and regulation.
Yeah, I can give also my comment. I think there are two aspects we should look into that. Maybe one legal aspect and one technical aspect. I think from technical aspect, we can obviously make them responsible for what they've done. But I think the most important one is the legal aspect, which is, of course, abiding with the rules and regulations that they provide service in Europe. So we know that a lot of US clients working in Europe, and time to time they get a big fine because of some of those rules that they don't follow that. So I believe there are a strong legal fact here that they potentially need to make sure that they follow it. So I think that's the main important point.
Okay. So maybe we can open questions from the audience. So anybody want to ask a question to the panelists? Anybody have any thoughts on the presentations? Please also state your name and which university or institution you're from. Thanks.
I am Shashikant. So I am currently a postdoc at Vienna University of Technology. So my question is a bit broader sense. For example, 2007-8, when social media came into public access, most of us, we have read that, okay, it's gonna further hyper globalize the connection, interaction, people would be more rational. But what we have seen is either two set of groups support this or don't support that, or this side or that side, which was not anticipated when social media came into picture, but we couldn't kind of not able to address this aspect of social impact. Now we are in the same technology or same paradigm we are seeing with generative AI. We are all talking about privacy, data regulations, all of those things. But what would be a potential social impact in the next decade that we could, as a computer science researcher, foresee, and how can we collaborate with the social science researchers to at least, if not mitigate, just to think about what might be a 10 years ahead impact on social systems of the system.
Great, thank you. Anybody want to pick up that question from the panel?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So actually, it's a hard question. So in my opinion, most issues come from social networks, social media, because in this context, we don't have the total control on data sources, on data, because most social networks allow users to post anything. Of course, we have also some cases in which they can block the contents, but the players don't have the full control on posts and data that is published over the internet. So in this case, in my opinion, we need a better control on the use of data coming from social networks to generate artificial intelligence, to generate new contents, and so on. This is a particular case study. We have also other application scenarios, for example, considering healthcare, but also considering the financial one, in which we have most control on data, and as a consequence, we can have trust outputs from AI models. But in my opinion, I already visit you, we need some kind of better control and regulation about the contents generated considering the data sources coming from social networks.
And some part of the question was about the impact on the future generation and the society. I think that our current discussion is about how to control the AI and generative AI, how to make it more safe and not to make any harm to anyone using the AI and making some profits of it and so on and so forth. But I think that the impact on the society is much deeper and should be taken into account, because for the future generation, as our kids, new generation of people, and we should show them how to differentiate and recognize what is generated artificially and what is generated by humans, and how to deal and how to work without the internet. Nowadays, it's very difficult because it's actually, it's very difficult to find paper dictionary, for example, when we are teaching, when we are learning a different language, or how, if you would like to find some definition of some mathematical term and so on and so forth. What we are doing now, we are looking for in the internet, we are looking for some information, and of course, it might be some generated by some not untrusted AI. So I think that as an impact for the new generation and on the society is that we should come back to some of teaching style as we had before internet era, just to teach young generations how to deal without internet, without digital information, how to work based on what they have and how to be creative. So I think this is the most important aspect of how generative AI might impact our future societies.
So let me pick up on a question then related to that before we return back to the audience. So when I look at the papers submitted to UCC and CC Grid and many cloud conferences, a significant number of papers are on resource management, scheduling, orchestration. So my question is, right, that given what you have just said in terms of both generative AI and also bias and so on that AI introduces, how can we change our orchestration and scheduling environments so that they are able to detect, for example, that the services that are being generated break one of these regulations, that, can we embed some capability into our scheduling management, our resource management systems, so that they're able to automatically flag, services that are hosted on cloud platforms that break one of these rules. So, i.e., this is generative. This data has been created through a generative AI algorithm, or it is violating user privacy, so that all cloud hosting platforms integrate them as part of their normal scheduling and resource management systems. So what are your thoughts on that? How could we have the next generation of scheduling and resource management systems that they're aware of these aspects directly into the cloud platforms themselves? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think maybe some kind of modeling of this those problems that you mentioned, you model it like an anomaly, and then if you detect an anomaly, then you can act on resource management based on that anomaly, which can be generative AI or something like that. So I think the hard part is to model the problem, like how we detect that, right? And then once you model it, then you can just bring it to the like a parameter or variable to your management system, and then it can take care of that. But I think the hard part is the modeling. And maybe this part of modeling, as our colleague mentioned from the audience, should involve like also social researchers and not only computer science, which is hard to sometimes talk together, right? So we can understand what is socially problematic to have and what is not socially problematic to have. So we can make a model that's more useful for computer science and research management.
Yeah, I can give a couple of comments. That I think the most important things for embedding that to the provider is we should clarify who is responsible for what exactly, right? So I think that's a very important point, because the ecosystem of what we have in the distributed computing could be quite complex. And who is responsible exactly for which part of this, software systems, it can be really, and sometimes a gray area, right? So you can simply get some of those existing scheduler with existing data set and train it and say, okay, there you go. I didn't do anything, right? I just trained it with the existing model, and that's what I schedule. So I think that's just what I mentioned, that we need a kind of a co-design kind of a model, which is between the developer and the providers, to make sure that this kind of system, because it's a qualitative factor, right? There is no quantity around that. And then I think the second thing is this should be as a kind of the extension or option that, for example, these tools being follow those rules and regulation if you want to use that. But still, we need to let other people that they opt to not using that, but not getting those green light or stars or other things that okay, I don't want the overhead of having all those checks and balances, but you have a lower trust on the outcome. But if you want a higher trust, then that's what the system with the extra overhead and other things, right? So I think this is the spectrum that we need to look into, that, not just force everyone, okay, you have to put all those check and balances for everything. Otherwise, it basically defeats the purpose of a lot of optimization that's the community done for decades. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. On this comment, I think that the chat, the example that you mentioned, is a good example, because then you can have accountability to the Microsoft who created the chat, but Microsoft can say that the users are accountable, because they trained the chat to be bad. So it's a very important.
As a short comment. Nevertheless, the question still would be, who should own this generative AI detectors and fake detectors? Who should own the rights to it? Who should provide the rules and the a list of what is allowed and what is not allowed? And what is the barrier and between the good and bad generative AI? So the question is, who should provide these regulations? Who should provide the information about? And can we trust the gatekeepers if they say that, okay, we have some fake detectors or, for example, generative AI detectors in their systems? So this the open question, still open question, who should provide the information and guidelines for these detectors in the systems?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Any questions from the audience? We can continue questions from the audience.
There is one question, sorry.
And please say who you are and which institution you're from. Thanks.
University of Modena, Reggio Emilia, Italy. So the point is that it's very, very important, this second issue, because we have to try to view what we can do in the future. The bad point is that now, how can we speak of data quality or whatever? All these systems are used by millions of people on data. They are untrusted and making bad conclusion. How we can, and so for the future, obviously we can check the addition of some data. But now we are living with this data. So I think that one suggestion is to inform people in order to try to detect fake news, fake conclusion. So I think that this direction is very, very important, because I don't think that we can control now something. We can try to improve in the future with rules and so on. But the reality is that we now have these data sets violating everything. We don't know who is collecting. We know the big player collecting, but so do you have some idea in order to improve in the future, both the understanding of the user about the trust, the level of trust of what is going out, so the young generation. I think it's very important to try to devise this.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe like data quality can be one of the drivers of the, let's say, the trust level that you give to a service, right? So you can have like different data quality operation, let's say. Then if you have a good data quality, you have like people taking care of the data all the time, so you can trust the data and so on, then maybe that kind of service can be a higher level service in terms of ethics, or in terms of like learning quality or learning how to do it. So I think it's a very important problem, because as this with bad data quality, right? So if you have good data quality, maybe you can have different levels of AI services.
Yeah, so if I just pick up that question before we pass on to Vaman. So could we think of a future where we have container frameworks like Docker containers or Kubernetes or whatever your favorite framework is, to say that these are certified containers, in the sense that these are been certified in the sense that they will not allow data leakage, or they will. So what happens is these container frameworks have embedded services that will automatically verify for generative content. So it has these content detectors built in. So what you could do is you could pre-ship, pre-developed containers that have been certified to be compliant to certain regulation. So what happens, therefore, is the cloud platforms only host containers that have gone through a certification process. Could that be the future of a trusted cloud platform? Go ahead, Baman. I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So exactly what I wanted. I want to give an example of similar with the Apple Store or the Google Play. So we have those kind of some steps they have. So when you upload your app to the Google Play or the App Store, there are rules that, and obviously privacy and security you need to follow, and sometimes they reject. They don't host it because they can't certify that this is a real. And with many of the mobile phones, we know that if you want to install something outside the App Store or the Google Play, they give you always the warning. Still, you as a user, you can select, right? So I don't think we can control the decision of the user. User can always trust on anything they want, right? So disinformation, misinformation, and we know that there are groups and teams that they deliberately do that. I mean, we know all those crazy words at what they do. But obviously, in terms of the providers, they can provide this information that basically what is the level of the trust and where this data are coming from, right? So basically that transparency helps them to make a better decision, but obviously you can't control what the user wants to decide. So you have a seatbelt in your car and you can decide not to wear that, right? So this is the rules that you have to use that, but still as a user and driver, you can decide not to do it. So I think that's the point of informing the user and give them the right information to make their informed decision.
Baman, Omer, I'm jumping in Massimo. This is a really interesting, Omer, the feedback we are trying to provide. In this perspective, I see a clear start in application, document container. If I try to translate them, something that continue to evolve, like, I don't know, transformers and AI, do you think, Omer, but all the audience, all the panel members, do you think, can we apply, because I like the idea, Omer, really, do you think is it possible to apply in a context with dynamic change every second, how we behave by the fact that the training all the time? So do you think, can we apply the model of application or content certified? What do you think, Omer and others? Is it possible for you? What do you think, Omer?
Yeah, I think in the past we've looked at, concept of encrypted containers. So what you could do is you could encrypt contents within a container. There's also elements like homomorphic encryption, whereby, you don't trust the container framework or the cloud provider. I think for me, it's an open question, right? That it's an open research question of what such a cloud hosting platform will look like, which is compliant to the Digital Markets Act. And I think it's a very interesting research area.
Some from the panel. You get my point. So by the fact that the model of this moment is different with the model of few minutes, and you certify the previous, maybe you can certify every 5 seconds a new one.
So in my opinion, obviously finding immediately a solution to this problem obviously is not possible, but combining different approaches, for example, normally detection systems, but also schedulers, as you discussed before, but also using containers and other virtualization technologies, because virtualization is not only container virtualization or virtualization. We can consider also other forms such as data virtualization, information fusion, and so on. We could solve these issues, but if we apply a workflow validating all the steps, starting from data collection to the generation of the new content. And from this point of view, technically, it will be useful to use, for example, technologies such as the blockchain. But I understand that from a commercial point of view, using these technologies is not trivial at all, because maybe companies prefer to have the revenue as soon as possible without investing in the trust and the safe of the workflow in generating the contents. But if we start to identify different contexts, different sectors, for example, entertainment, healthcare, politics and other sensitive context, we can start to regulate something. And obviously, we have to consider that each country has its own regulation, and finding a good compromise among all the country regulations is not trivial at all. But starting from certified data sources, validating all the whole process in generating new contents, generating AI would be a good starting point.
Yeah, just a quick comment follow-up with what I think Massimo mentioned about the certified container or certified part. So I think that's a good idea, but as a short-term question that Sonia asked, I believe the point that I mentioned in the framework about the contestability, I think you should be able to contest that, right? So you should be able to question, okay, so I did all those certification and follow, but still this outcome look like it's not correct. So there should be a feedback to the system that, okay, so this is produced by this system and we believe it is offensive or it's not correct. And there should be a timely process to address that in the system, because whatever you do, you're not going to get it 100% right? So you should have a feedback. This is very important. You'll be able to contest that. And I think that's the critical point on that.
Only a short comment as a follow-up. It simply means that we should put more focus on some technical stuff related to secure and trusted execution of services and the containers in the computer systems. So during this conference, I have seen one paper about Intel SGX technology. So maybe you should put more focus on adjusted zones, Intel SGX solutions. It's very technical research. It's some might say that it's engineering stuff, not research, but nevertheless, it seems that we need to put more focus on this stuff as well in the future research papers.
The question.
There is another question from the audience.
Okay, great. Thanks.
The question is, obviously, I am very happy of the idea of this certified content. But on the other side, I think that in order to be successful, we have to make not a technological advancement. We have to convince the people that they need generative AI, but starting from certified content. So it's a political educational issue. It's not a technical issue. I ask if you agree on this. Obviously, from the technical point of view, I work in data-driven AI and data quality, but it is not this the point, okay? How do you see that?
The question is, should we convince people or enforce them to use trusted and secure containers as EU do with, for example, with gatekeepers?
I'll just give a quick. So I think informing the user and educate them, I think that's a critical point there, because again, you'll not be able to enforce them. Billions of users, they're using it every day. Not all of them are tech savvy. Not all of them, I mean, a lot of kids, they're using those systems, which might be problematic for them. So again, I believe education, part of the education system, and helping them to understand what this content is and what is the impact of those in the study. I mean, again, all of those, one of those principles has to be the human factor and human value in all those systems. So I think one of those principles in all of those certification part, if we're going to have that, has to have the human values and human sense. So I think this is important. And of course, educating them to understand what's the impact. Otherwise, it would be, you can't stop them, right?
Yes.
Omer, I think we can go for conclusion, if you can provide us some final comments.
Okay, sure, absolutely. So Thank you very much to everybody for presenting. I think one aspect that perhaps we could pick up in the future is enforcement. I think we've had service level agreements and SLAs in cloud provision for many years, which is very much performance related. Could we have service level agreement type contracts for generative AI and other systems, so that if you violate one of these, you're liable for, but I think, so thank you very much, everybody, for, your comments. I think this is a very interesting new direction of travel. I think AI will probably be a major, I guess, workload for many cloud service providers going forward. So it's both AI for clouds and clouds for AI, so cloud hosted AI services, and how AI could be used as a way to tune and, improve the performance of clouds. So I think very much like what Sonia asked, these opens up a lot of interesting challenges. Go ahead, Massimo.
So, Omer, I'm jumping in because I want to thank you a lot. Unfortunately, you were not here, but this is for you.
Thank you very much.
Big hands for Omer. Thank you, Omer, for everything.
Thank you.
So, to be honest, I'm thinking I'm really honest, if I were to